One of the nation's leading authorities on autism is out with a new book offering advice on working with young people with autism. 1 in 54 children is diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder in this country, 1 in 54. And of those, between 24 and 40% are considered to be nonverbal. Well, Jamie Wax went to Colorado to meet with the book's author, Temple Grandin, who was once told she would never be able to speak. Jamie, good morning.
Good morning, Tony. That's right. As you'll see, she did learn to speak, write, teach, and so much more. Temple Grandin has a PhD, is a university professor, and is considered an expert in many more than one fields. I met with her at the Temple Grandin Equine Center in Colorado State University, where she told me it's important to expose those on the spectrum to the world.
I always make sure I'm introduced as Temple Grandin, Professor of Animal Science. I think that's important, that I have a real job.
Temple Grandin has split her life between understanding animals and helping explain autism.
You consider autism a gift?
In the milder forms, it can give you some real advantages. But in the milder forms, you get a brain that's more thinking, rather than a brain that's more social-emotional. Being social-emotional eats up a ton of processor space in the brain.
My name is Temple Grandin.
As the HBO film about her details, her brain works differently. She thinks in pictures.
Can you bring everything you've seen to your mind?
Sure.
Even if it were an everyday object like, say, shoes?
I see all the shoes I've worn, and my mother's, and other people I've met, and you have 3 pairs. One needs a new heel. And there's shoes in newspaper ads and TV ads. And
It's a feature of her autism that has helped her understand animal behavior.
My work with cattle, the first thing I did was to get down in the chutes to see what cattle were seeing, because I noticed that cattle would, sometimes stop and refuse to move through a chute. And I noticed that maybe there was a coat on a fence, a piece of chain hanging down, and other people didn't notice those things.
At the time you discovered all of these things, you were having trouble relating to other human beings, but you related well to animals. Why do you think that was?
Well, I think I related to animals because they don't think in words, they think in pictures.
You've seen a lot of breakthroughs with autistic people and these animals. Huh?
Absolutely. I've had parents tell me that their kid did their first words on a horse.
Wow.
And this would be mostly younger children.
The 74-year-old is the co-author of 11 books on autism. Her latest, Navigating Autism, 9 Mindsets for Helping Kids on the Spectrum, encourages seeing autistic children as more than just their diagnosis.
It's a very interesting approach to break this down into mindsets. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from the idea of not having them locked into the label. Let's look at other medical conditions that are commonly associated with autism. You take them into the regular doctor and they say, well, he's just pitching a fit because he has autism. Well, maybe he's having behavior problems because his stomach hurts, and that needs to be treated.
It's interesting to me because as the parent of an autistic child, in many ways I feel like my daughter is born in the best time in history to have autism.
Well, when I was a child, the individuals with autism either had no speech delay or maybe a very slight speech delay. They would usually get out and get jobs and do stuff. Kids like me, I was really severe looking at age 3. And what was usually done with kids like me in the 50s was just put us in an institution. Today, things are so much better. There's just no comparison. But where we're falling down is with the older, fully verbal kid making that transition from the world of school to the world of work.
Grandin says schools are not putting enough emphasis on hands-on training, vocations where autistic children can excel.
Students get interested in things they get exposed to.
And so you should expose them to as broad a range.
Well, I'm a
as
big
you can.
fan of exposing them to many things. And people ask me all the time, what would you do if you could change the schools? I want to put all the hands-on classes back in. Art, sewing, cooking, woodworking, theater, music. There's a lot of kids that are kind of different that aren't getting exposed to the things that they could turn into a career. I had a girl in my class last semester who had never used a ruler. They just don't have any idea where anything comes from.
Do you think the pandemic and going virtual made that even worse?
Well, it certainly didn't help it any, but I also learned that having a good online class is a lot more work than an in-person class, because you have to do the discussion boards, and to do those well, it's a ton of work.
I have to ask you, and I'm going to try not to get emotional about it, but you are the person who allowed me to see inside my child's mind.
Well, good.
And to help her. What does it mean to you that I'm one of millions of people?
Well, it really
who feel
means a
that
lot to me
gratitude?
when someone says that my book or something I said helped a parent understand their kid, and that's what I like to hear.
I should have known I was sunk as soon as I said I'm going to try not to get emotional. But really, she has been such a revelation for myself, millions of other people connected to the autism spectrum, and one of my very best friends, Andy Merlis, who produced this piece, who also is the father of an autistic daughter. And her book, Navigating Autism, is out and on sale now and is really a great resource.
Wow. Who was the person that helped her? Because she grew up in a time, like she said, where you would be taken to an institution.
Her mother. Her mother, she would have been taken from her family and never have seen her mother again, and her mother would not allow that to happen. In fact, to the peril of her parents' marriage. She disagreed so much with what her father wanted to do. It's an incredible story of advocacy before we even know what the spectrum was.
You said during the commercial break that Temple feels like we are leaning on technology a little bit too much when it comes to kids.
Yeah, she thinks autistic kids like video games and screens are very dangerous for autistic kids right now, and using that as a sort of babysitter, which I think a lot of parents are guilty of sometimes, is very bad for kids on the spectrum.
Yeah, babysitter press play, we call it in my household.
That's right, I understand.
Important story.
Well done, Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie, heck of a story, well done.
Thanks so much.
And if you want to hear more of Jamie's conversation with Temple Grandin, you can on today's CBS Mornings podcast. Next, we'll take a look back at all that mattered this week. We'll be right back.